Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in time and space. This is Jefferson Davis over at Blind Photography. That's BLINDPHOTOGRAPHY.US. That's blindphotography.US. In case you were wondering where to go to read all the wonderful articles that I write. I am Jefferson Davis. I am a blind photographer, as well as many other things: a husband, a son, an uncle, all the general stuff, a brother, big brother to 5 sisters. Busy guy, but I'm not busy enough. Today we're going to talk about the Retina 3C, that's the small C, and we may talk about the big C. I don't have a big C, so I'm not going to give you any experience with that one, but I'll just, give you the difference between the two, and also what kind of, after my experience with the retinas, what would I recommend to somebody that's visually impaired like myself or blind as far as folding cameras are concerned, or cameras in general. And also, we're going to talk about being blind because that's part of the podcast. I try to make it, at least half of it about photography and cameras, and the other half or a portion of it about being blind. Now, last week, or last podcast we had, I believe it was last week, episode 3, this is episode 4, we talked about the Saga with the Kodak Retina IIIc, the small c, and how I had ordered one from Washington State out in the middle of nowhere, and it took, 9 days to get to Phoenix, and it sat there for 3 days. Then it was shipped back for some reason to Washington State. Then it was shipped back to Phoenix, and then it eventually ended up in my hands in Payson, Arizona, but it took a little over 3 weeks. It's like 22 days to get this camera. And then I got it, and I was all excited, a little bit anxious because of waiting so long. And I got it and realized the cocking rack was bad, which is an Achilles heel, as I've written in 2 different articles now about these retinas. Not all of them, but the older ones didn't use cocking racks. The 2A and the 1A and the original one, it either had a winding advance lever or a little winding knob that you use, so it was all direct gear. There was no cocking rack there to cock the shutter. And and the older ones, like the Voigtlander Vitos, you actually have to cock the shutter yourself. So really, winding it was just advancing the film, not really actually cocking the shutter. So, and not to get off topic, but just so you understand. So I went on the internets and I looked for a new cocking rack, and they are $40 a piece. And that's not an unreasonable price, given that these cameras are dwindling in. I mean, they made millions of them, but the issue is they're sitting in grandpa's attic, or, people know the value of them and they're ridiculously priced. They're great cameras. So I got lucky and I found a charity that had one for sale for like $40, which is still cheap for a 3C, small C, just like I had. And I offered them $35. I sent them an offer. I love it when people allow you to send offers, because at least I feel that that maybe there's an option here. And they took 35, which, was a fair deal, because it was not tested. I didn't know if it worked either. I didn't know if the cocking rack on it was bad or not. But it was worth a shot in the dark, right? Which is what's, you're taking a shot in the dark if you buy on eBay, period. Usually you win, but not always, not with these retinas. So I got it, and the cocking rack I took the top off. The cocking rack was in mint condition, great condition. So that was great. And it advanced the shutter correctly. The shutter was a little sticky. So what I ended up doing, plus the front element was, had a bad place on it. Probably not significant enough to show up on black and white film or even color, perhaps. But it was bothersome, given I had one sitting right here that had a spotless front element on it. So basically took the shutter assembly and the lens assembly off of the one with the bad cocking rack and put it on this one. And then there was a matter of the light meter. It was sluggish. It's actually working well now, but it started working perfectly after I moved it around, knocked it around a little bit. I think it was just from sitting for so long. You were thinking shipping it got dinged around enough, but apparently not. So it was sluggish. I knew the other one was accurate within a third of a stop, so I took that one and put it on this one. And mind you, I'm legally blind, so it is a task to do all this stuff. And I swore 6 months ago that I wasn't going to work on any more cameras because it's just too frustrating. Well, I've had to learn a lot of patience along the way. And, it takes me longer to do things. It takes me longer to frame a shot. It takes me longer to work on stuff and stuff that I used to do, like working on cars. Stuff that I can't do anymore. And it's just like you have to learn patience when you're going blind. There's nothing you can do about it. You can get frustrated. You can swear. You can say things, and you can get mad at people, but that doesn't help anybody at the end of the day. It's about patience, right? Learning patience, learning from your experience. And my whole life has been about learning patience. Because I've had other disabilities since day after I was born, and that's why I've been blind in one eye all my life, and now I'm just going blind in the other. But even in kindergarten, first and second grade, they were teaching me Braille because they thought I would go blind in my one good eye, which is now not good at all, a lot sooner. So, and I have other disabilities I'm not going to go into, but I've always worked since I paid taxes since I was 16, almost 40 years now. I understand, patience, having to understand patience and having to be patient with people. So anyway, back to the cameras. I do get off subject. So I moved the light meter from the other one that I knew was accurate within a third of a stop. And then there was a matter of the top plate, or the top, section. We call it the top plate. Well, the one that I received in the mail, I mean, it was as described, but I'm legally blind. I don't see everything. And it had the previous owner's social security number inscribed on it. And I don't want anyone on the internet seeing that, because this gentleman or lady, whatever, their name wasn't on it, just their social security number. They could still be in a retirement home, and if I display their social security number, somebody could take that and use it and be, who knows what could happen, right? They might still have credit. That could get ruined. So, but back in the day, you have to think back to the 50s and 60s, 1950s and 60s. You could put your social security number on something like that. And if I found your camera, back in the day, you could call Social Security Administration and say, hey, I found the camera. I want to return it to the owner, and their social security number is on here. Okay. They would give you the address. But now, obviously, you can't do that. You might be able to do that. And it would be curious for me to call, but I'm not going to sit on hold for 2 hours just to find out who the owner is, right? So I took the top plate, even though it's a faux pas, but at this point, I'm just trying to cobble together a camera that works, right? So I took the top plate from the other one with minimal to no blemishes on it and no private information on it, and put it on that one. Worked perfectly, no problems. And the other one was a little bent up, so it actually is a pain to get it to mount in. So, it took two not so good cameras to make one good camera, but I took it out, film tested it. It works great. The pictures that I posted on blindphotography.us in a new article I posted yesterday, I believe that was the 22nd, are okay, but I'm having some issues with my development. I don't know. I actually think it's my fixer causing the issue. It's an older fixer. So I'm gonna refresh that and make a new fixer to rectify that. So I cobbled this camera together, cleaned it up, made sure everything was working well, put the other one back together with its pieces. It's a parts camera now, so I'm just hanging on to it. I probably will sell it though. But all it needs is a new cocking rack and the shutter CLA, and it'll be good. So I took it down to the park and took some pictures, and they were very sharp. As I said, I've got some development issues. The last couple of rolls they've not developed properly. I don't know exactly what's going on. I think it's the fixer because it's cloudy. Um, but I'm gonna put a new fixer in and here in a little while and take some more pictures and develop a roll and see what happens. I may have to. This is a Bostick and Sullivan or Bostick and it's B&S anyway. They sell high-end film developing stuff, and I bought their fixer, their alkaline fixer, a long time ago. And seemed to work fine, but it does go bad a lot quicker than Zone Imaging's Eco Zone Fix, which is a powder which you mix. It has its own issues. If the water is not hot enough, you'll think that you have it mixed, but it'll reparticleize, and then you get little white places on your film where the fixer, the particles of the chemicals, will sit on the film, which is not good. So you got to make sure the water is really, really hot. You mix it for a long time. I put the water a lot hotter than what they actually recommend, but other than that, it's great and it lasts forever. And when it's fairly new, when you're under, let's say, 10 rolls of film, it'll fix it in 3 minutes flat or quicker. It's fast. So I have a Kodak Retina 1, a 1A. All these I bought dirt cheap, like under $40. A 1A, a 1, I don't remember what, I think it's a 010. It's a later model 1 from 1947. A 1A, which is from the early 50s. A 2C, which is a great camera, but no light meter, from the mid 50s. And then the 3 small C from 1957, 58, somewhere in there. I really like the 3C. It's nice to have the convenience of the light meter being built in. But as far as ergonomics and what I like, now I like the EV system. I've grown to like it and not having to adjust shutter speed and aperture separately. It's just one, I can feel the clicks from 1/500th if I'm outside, for example, all the way over to 1/30th or whatever, the widest aperture or the closest, the smallest aperture is on that particular EV setting. Like around here in Arizona, usually in the middle of the day like this, EV usually 15. And the book, if you read it, and I highly recommend that you read or listen to it like I do, will tell you that 14 is broad daylight. That's bright as you're ever gonna need. The light must have been dimmer back in the day because the ASAs were less. The ISO, the film sensitivity was less as well. But it says EV14 for ASA 80, which is what I use 100 film, but I usually shoot it at 80 and process it at 80. So it gets pulled just a little bit, so it's finer grain. But usually I run around 15, even with the 2C. 15, and sometimes we were somewhere, and it actually gave me a reading of 16. So Arizona, it's bright out here. It's got all the desert, reflecting the sun, so I think that plays a part into it. But 15 for broad daylight, let's say, 80 speed film is about right. But what would I recommend? Well, I don't love it yet, but I do like the Retina series. I've had issues, and the cocking rack is an Achilles heel, well-known Achilles heel. But usually that's the only thing that goes bad on them. The shutter, would get sticky, and that's sometimes the cause of the cocking rack to be, the gears to be sheared off. But that's usually all that happens to them. So if you replace that, you're good. My tried and true is the Voigtlander IIa. It's a f3.5, not an f2. It's a further focus and distance. I think the Retina 3C and the Retina 2C both have closest focus and different distance of like 2.5 feet. You can get close up to stuff, and I love that. The Voigtlander Vito, you have to manually cock shutter. You have to set the shutter speed and the aperture. And when you're legally blind and barely able to see as it is, it makes life a little difficult. But well, up until I started using, I had it all memorized. It was all in, and I like the pictures that come out of it. It's got a color scope R, Voigtlander lens, but the Kodak is newer and is sharper, and it has a light meter, and it cocks the shutter for me if it's working. Sometimes simple is better though, so you have to balance between the two. Do you want to have to cock the shutter? Do you want to have to set shutter speed and aperture manually, or do you want to use the EV system? What do you want to do? So you have to keep all that in mind. I like the EV system, but sometimes I want to do things manually. It depends on where we're going and what we're doing. The F2 is great for low light conditions. That provides me a lot more light. I can shoot at a higher shutter speed, less shake. And that is an issue. The Retina 3C is a heavy camera. So when you click the shutter, it shakes. So if you're at like 1/30th, if you're not completely steady, I'm 53, and I'm not as steady as I used to be. And usually it takes me a minute to frame a shot because I can't see the entire window, right? And it has a bigger viewfinder window. And another thing is the 3C has a rangefinder and the Voigtlanders do not, the Vitos. The Vito 3 does, but that thing's too expensive. I would love to have it, but it's too expensive. But it doesn't even have a light meter. I mean, come on. But the Vito 2A has an advance up on the top, advance lever that works every time. Never any issues with it. The Retinas, the 2C and the 3C and 3 big C, they all have advance lever on the bottom, which you do get used to. But because it's on the bottom, there's more gears, more stuff to go wrong, especially that cocking rack that I keep repeating. So you have to make up in your mind, if you're visually impaired like I am, I would not recommend one of the retinas unless you just like fiddling and taking a long time to get a shot. The Voigtlander, once I get a light reading and it does have clicks, so I can feel where I am, 1/300th of a second or 1/500th or whatever, F8. Then I can just pop off as many as I want if I'm doing landscape, which is most of what I do. I don't do a lot of city stuff because I don't live in a big city. So you have to make up that determination. But the Voigtlanders, they are tried and true, and I've only had one that I couldn't fix, and it was a issue, that I bought 3 that never had any issues at all. The shutters are good, they don't get sticky or not very common too. Most of the retinas do have sticky shutters. Sometimes you just have to actuate the shutter a few times and get it working again. Or you can, worst comes to worst, you can heat it up, especially if it's wintertime, and get it working again. But what would I recommend? A Vito 2 or a Vito 2A if you want a folding camera that's small. And they're not that expensive. So if something were to happen to it, if you were to drop it, then you can replace it. And there's a good many of them out there. The 2As are getting rare, so they're worth a little more money, but sometimes I see them on eBay for $40, and that's a steal. No light meter, no rangefinder. The rangefinder on the retinas is awesome, and it works great. You usually have to clean them because they get dingy over time. Well, once you do that, there's no issues with them. Sometimes they need adjustment, but I've not owned one yet that does. Now, speaking of being at the park, so the other day when I was photographing with the 3 small seed, Um, I was framing up a shot, and before I got to the shot, I was walking on the sidewalk, and there was this guy walking his dog. It was an older gentleman, looked like somebody who worked white collar in an office most of his life. He was retired, retirement age. So I stepped onto the grass to take my picture about 10 feet away from him. And I started composing my shot, looking, left, right, up, and down, trying to capture the whole scene because I can't see the whole thing. Um, and as I was getting ready to advance the shutter to take the shot, because I already had the right EV number and everything, he said, um, "How are you able to take pictures if you're blind?" I said, and it took me a moment to reply, and I think he probably thought I was mad. Um, but when somebody says something that is blunt like that, I could tell he didn't mean it in a rude kind of way. He was just being blunt and probably that type of person. And I like that type of person, just honest, blunt, to the point. Sometimes we take that as being mean, but it can mean other things, just the way they are. Um, I said, if you've done something for 40 years, and I have, would you quit doing it just because you went blind? He's like, you're right. I said, yes, sir. I've been photographing for a very long time, and I plan on continuing to do it no matter how blind, how crippled, or whatever I am. I'm going to keep doing it. He's like, I like your attitude. And he kept walking the dog. And probably a nice guy, but, didn't have much of a conversation with him. But I wanted to say a few other things at first, but, holding your tongue for just a moment to let your mind catch up to the emotions usually will equal better results, is my experience. Um, so I deal with that kind of stuff all the time. I'm, legally blind. I have 5 degrees, like looking through a small coffee straw or a really tiny peephole. Is that would be actually better, but a tiny peephole um, is all I see out of one eye. I mean, that's all I've got. So I walk around with a blind cane, not because I want to, because I have to. I don't like running into people or stuff, banging my head, falling. So I do this, and I go down to the park, and I'm going to, again, here in just a little while. I go down to the park and take some pictures because I've got to test out this new fixer, and then I'll walk home. But people do, it's ironic that somebody that's blind or visually impaired wants to take pictures. But as long as I can click the shutter and I have a general expectation of what I'm doing and where I'm pointing, because you have other senses. You can feel the wind, you can hear the water. You have other things telling you where you are and what's going on around you, the temperature, how you feel, what do you feel about this particular place. So as long as I can do it and I can afford film, which is a, issue for most of us, but, it is what it is, then I'm going to keep doing it. So, um, and I do get I'm sure I get a lot of looks. I don't see them, thankfully, and a lot of gawks and people whispering. But the guy that some people would call rude, I would rather somebody ask me a question than to whisper and to gawk and to, shake their head or laugh. It's okay to laugh sometimes, but yeah. So that's that. So at the end of the day, I would not recommend the retinas to someone who's visually impaired unless it's one of the older, like a 1A or something. But then you might as well uh, get a Vito if you're gonna go that route. So it's all your preference because it's the same lens, 3.5. So it's at that point, it's up to you what you want. What do you want? Um, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all that's been going on. Is just the camera, and I go to the valley to Phoenix once a week for training. I thoroughly enjoy that. That's where I learn Braille and assistive technologies and how to survive blind, how to eat, how to, they teach you a lot of stuff and it's great. And I'm grateful to have that service provided to me because I'm originally from South Carolina. I didn't come here for assistance. I was hoping my eyesight would hang on a little while longer, but South Carolina doesn't offer. Obviously, you have disability no matter what state in the United States you live in. If, once you wait however long, a year, 2 years, 3 years, I know a lady with Parkinson's that's waited like 5 years to get disability. It's ridiculous. You obviously have that, but in South Carolina, all they are focused on, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just their attitude is keeping you employed because they don't want you drawing disability. And I get that. And disability is not enough money to live off of in this day and time. Most people get between $1,500 and $1,800 a month, and that won't even pay the rent here. So it's not enough to live off of, and I'm still working, and I plan on continuing to work with or without that. So I'm not getting it now, but I'm just saying in the future tense, if I were to start getting it, I would still work because I've got to be busy doing something. But in South Carolina, there's nothing. And it's not because there's not money there. There is plenty of money there. It's just I guess there's not enough blind people for it to be a demand situation where it has, there's just not a lot for us. You're kind of stuck. I had a counselor. I was her client. I forget what she called herself, but she would call me, once every 2 weeks to a month and check in. And they do offer assistive technology stuff, but you're going to wait a year or two to get it, and then you're not going to get any training for it. So, they do have stuff. It's just a lot less that they can offer. But there's plenty of money in that state. I just think it's a matter of demand and people knowing that this stuff needs to be a thing. It needs to be offered. So, and the system is a little different than it would be here in Arizona or California or somewhere else. But I'm still working, still paying taxes like I've done for almost 40 years. So I'm still contributing to the system. So that others can sit at home and talk trash about other people. So, but anyway, that's all that's really been going on is the camera drama. But I wrote a post about it over blindphotography.us. I know you guys get sick of me saying that, but I'm really trying to get people over to the website, please. Go check it out because I write stuff all the time. And I'm working on a personal blind post, which I try to only put one of them for every 2 or 3 camera photography related posts because I don't want to, seem like a whiner. I'm not whining, but just letting you know what's going on and how things are going. So anyway, this is Jefferson Davis over at blindphotography.us. I hope everyone has a great day, great week, and we'll see you on the next one next week sometime. It's Jefferson Davis signing out. Thank you.